Sunday morning, welcome in. I am Big Race Jim. This is Sunday Morning Coffee on Past the Wire TV. We are inside. We just moved over the weekend, so pardon all the boxes. I'm whispering because everybody's still sleeping upstairs. So we'll try and breeze through this quick. The internet was not really cooperating much this morning. A couple of reboots. Um, so if there's any hiccups, I apologize and we'll get it sorted for next week. But we're going to go through the Arkansas Derby. We're going to go through the Florida Derby. We're going to go back to early this week and talk about these HISA fees and what is taking place within the world of horse racing. Sunday Morning Coffee, as always, brought to you by our great friends at Shorebet Coffee and our great friends at Amwager. Watching replays on Amwager this morning, super easy. Let's dive in to Oak Lawn and the Arkansas Derby, where Cornucopian, the 4-5 favorite, the 4-5 favorite, out of the gate like an absolute rocket.
Arkansas Derby slow break from the maiden publisher and Cornucopian
Right there, the 9 on the outside. And this was just wild, right? Like you figure going around this turn that perhaps these two would get off the throttle a little bit, but the complete opposite happened, and they went 22 and change to the quarter, and then like 45 and change to the half. And you knew that neither one of these horses, unless Cornucopian was an absolute super horse, you knew he wasn't going to knew he wasn't going to hang on. And Matt Dinnerman, really exciting race call. You knew, he knew too that neither one of these horses um, was gonna hang on, and you could see Sandman there in the red silks start to make his move. And Coal Battle, I thought, had a pretty nice run here. This was pretty impressive, and he just kind of leveled off. Sandman took advantage of that wicked hot pace, and he swung pretty wide. And this horse is super green. Like you'll see it here, where he, kind of almost cuts Publisher off. Luckily, he was a length or two clear at this point. But I'm not really sure how much we can glean from a race like this with these types of fractions. Could we see fractions like that in the Kentucky Derby? Sure, if a front running shipper from Japan enters, then yeah, we might see some fractions like that, like we did last year. It was pretty swift up front. I just don't know how how much we can glean from that race, given just how fast those fractions were up front, and neither one of those horses was around at the end. And Sandman definitely the beneficiary of a complete pace meltdown. The one thing I will say is I liked what I saw from this publisher. Right, he's the 3. Let's look at it again. Right, it's not a great break from him. He's all the way back in last, and we don't have to watch the whole race again. But I just wanted to show that uh, this horse hasn't won a race yet. It's still a maiden, um, but I thought that was pretty impressive for him to stay engaged like that. And again, perhaps benefiting from the meltdown in front of him. But I thought that was a decent late run from Publisher, and something that we should keep an eye on moving forward. That said, if they do decide to go to the Derby, if they've got enough points, why not? It's the Derby. I'd be attempting to break his maiden in the Derby, which I want to say maybe has happened once or twice before, but not in many, 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 many years. So kind of a ho hum Arkansas Derby. Sandman, sure, this is kind of like a clunker type that, you know, probably makes sense somewhere in your exotics for the Derby. You know, a win candidate. mm, we'll see what shakes out over next weekend, but um, probably an exotics player for me, but not a win candidate in my view. But hey, as we look a little bit closer, things start to present themselves. More data starts to come out. Perhaps I can change my tune, but definitely the beneficiary of a massive, massive pace meltdown. And I'm not sure that there's much we can glean from that race. Cornucopian, anytime you're blowing out of there in 22 and 45, it's going to be tough to sustain that for a mile and an eighth, especially when you have to try and hold off some decent horses behind you. So, eh, is it too early to say that maybe he's not cut out for that distance? Um, maybe, maybe. Uh, Definitely, only in his second or third start, probably needs a little bit more conditioning to try and get that distance. So we'll see what happens. But would have been impressive, sprinter or miler with those kinds of fractions. All right, let's take a look at the Florida Derby and Tapan Street. I would have pronounced it Tappan Street, but perhaps that's a famous thing that I'm not entirely aware of. So Tapan Street gets swung out like way wide here. Like that, you're 5, 6 paths over. So already you're behind the eight ball. Um, the horses that are in front of him are probably a cut or two below the upper rung of this division from what we've seen so far this year. But I thought Tapan Street was in a nice position here, right? If you've got confidence on this horse, and most people had confidence on this horse, the horse is bet down to 2-1. You got to like where you're at here, as this gap. You can see the gap with the leader starts to close here. I'm not really sure that there was a whole heck of a lot in this race other than Tapan Street uh, and Sovereignty, because Tapan Street and Sovereignty, they both just they both just really kind of swallow up these horses. You know, Madacat Road was out in front here and had every opportunity to win this race and didn't. Neo Equos, the same thing, right? These horses just get swallowed up like they're standing still by Tapan Street and Sovereignty. Sovereignty took a little bit longer to get going than maybe you would have liked, but look at those strides from Sovereignty. Let's just pull it back here a little bit so we could see the top of the stretch. So Sovereignty kind of finds his stride here. And these strides are just gigantic as he's coming down the stretch here, right? Japan Street looked fine, but those strides from Sovereignty are gobbling up a lot of ground. And, he just perhaps left himself a little bit too much to do. Couldn't find his stride until, you know, maybe somewhere between the eighth pole and the 16th pole, and just kind of left himself a little bit too much to do. But out of these two moving forward, I would probably be on Sovereignty coming out of this race. Take nothing away from Tapan Street. Ran a great race. Run a Grade One Florida Derby. Right, it's a it's a quality race. But again, I'm not sure what else is of this Grade One quality um, behind those two, and just looking at the makeup and the dynamics of that stride from Sovereignty. He's a player for me moving forward. I don't think he lost anything in defeat, and to be honest, I don't even think that's going to even give you a better price on him in the Derby. Um, I thought that was a fine race from him, and I was impressed by his stride length there in the last 16th, last eighth of a mile. I thought that looked pretty positive. So I'd still be interested in him moving forward. Um, Now, like we've talked about ad nauseum, these final preps traditionally, and it didn't happen the last couple years, but traditionally, when you're looking at decades and decades and decades of Kentucky Derby data, those last two preps are our best indication of performance on Kentucky Derby Day. And what we generally want to see, and what I want to see, is a horse that has finished first and second, first and or second in that final prep. Final prep. That's a mandatory for me when I look at win contenders. So Sovereignty won his prior race, finished second here. I thought he looked decent in this second. So again, he continues to be a player for me moving forward. And again, with the Arkansas Derby and Oaklawn, um, that whole Oaklawn sort of series and circuit, those races coming into it, like look really closely at the horses that have won there. They tend to have a decent amount of success in the Derby. So, a couple come to mind: Mystic Dan, American Pharaoh, um, Danza. Right, I believe he won the Arkansas Derby and then finished fourth in the Kentucky Derby, I believe. So next weekend, when you have the Wood, the Santa Anita Derby, and the Bluegrass at Keeneland, we'll see we'll get a more complete picture. But from these two races, I think the horse that I liked the most coming out of these two races over the weekend is probably Sovereignty. That was a pretty evenly run race. Fractions were pretty standard and typical. And I thought just visually, he looked he looked most impressive. I thought, to me, coming down the stretch. And like John always says, trust your eyes, right? Trust your eyes. So I'm going to trust my eyes over the next couple of weeks. Watch a ton of replays through Amwager and see what I see leading in to the Kentucky Derby. We'll take a quick break and we'll come back and we're going to dive right into the last sip. I've got some stuff to say about these HISA fees.
in the Kentucky Derby.
For some, they say it's the most exciting 2 minutes in sports. For us, it's about potential financial opportunities. Never bring a knife to a gunfight, and make no mistake, big money is up for grabs, and this is a fight. Never settle for second best. The Past the Wire annual Kentucky Derby seminar. Nobody does it better. Preparation is key. Be better prepared, delve deeper, stealth. They won't see us coming and they won't know we're there. Money management, ticket structure, pace, all the intangibles, thoroughgraph, everything that matters to make it count, to have that edge. In the end, if things go as planned, it'll be like we stole the money.
If you think horse racing cares about smaller tracks like Canterbury or Emerald Downs or Delta Downs or Louisiana Downs, you're wrong. So, what did we see come out early this week? HISA was changing up its fee structure, and the winners, surprisingly, are the major horse racing players in the industry, Churchill Downs and Naira. And kudos to them for probably making a very strong case that, hey, we're the bullies in the room and you're going to do what we say. And HISA did what they said. So they're changing up the fee structure. And the way I understand it is that the fee structure will now be based on the number of the average runners per race per day, I believe. And it's moving away from a fee structure that had to do with um, purse amounts. So Churchill Downs, Naira have some of the higher purses, so they were paying a large bulk of these fees. So if you flip that and do it off of the average runners, the average number of runners, Churchill Downs, Naira get a discount. Delta Downs, Emerald Downs, Canterbury, they don't get a discount. Their fees are going up. And when you look at the whole ecosystem of racing, the haves and the have nots, right? I mean, we could argue who really has, right? In an industry that seemingly, getting smaller and smaller uh, by the day. But this is just going to make it smaller and smaller and accelerate that contraction. These small tracks are probably budgeted down to the penny. So when you increase their fees, what does that mean? That means the stall rentals got a little bit higher. That means race entry got a little bit higher. For all of these people that work in the industry at these smaller tracks, that's going to hit them right in the pocket where it hurts the most. And that's going to drive people away from these tracks or out of the industry together. And I think you could look at this one of two ways. One being the industry is just contracting around these large tracks and these large events, right? The Kentucky Derby, the Preakness, if you care about the Preakness, Belmont, Keeneland, Saratoga, Breeders' Cup, Del Mar in the summer, right? After that, like who's actually sustaining these other tracks? And this fee structure is just going to accelerate the demise of these smaller racetracks around the country. And sure, maybe that's fine. Maybe these horse racing executives see that and are planning, and this is part of the planning, just a sort of natural contraction of these smaller racetracks, like we've been seeing over the last handful of years with um, you know the land of these racetracks are on being worth more to condo and apartment and housing complex developers than it is as a gambling option. So perhaps these executives see that, and this is all part of the plan to just make these tracks go away. Or maybe there is some concerted effort by these larger outfits to you know accelerate the demise of a lot of these smaller tracks. And it's just unfortunate that there isn't more sort of coordination um, between a lot of these entities, right? I've always been a believer of a rising tide lifts all ships sort of mentality, and there's not that collective um, decisions aren't being made for the overall good in horse racing. And I feel like this changing this fee structure is a clear example of that. And it's unfortunate, but I guess that's just the reality of it, because we do have, again, like I mentioned last week, I wrote an article about Fox Sports getting involved in horse racing. And they told me that it's a sporting event first, a gambling event, maybe second, third, or fourth, and contraction in horse racing is a good thing. And maybe it is, but right now it just seems like the larger tracks are doing whatever they can to accelerate the demise of a lot of these other smaller tracks around the country. And you ask somebody, oh, well, why is there no isn't much coordination between these tracks? Oh, well, we have a cross country pick five on Saturday. Okay, okay. Not really what I mean by that question, but sure. You guys are working together to put together a cross country pick five. Very good. Thank you. And I hate to be sarcastic, but it's like a lot of times when you have these conversations and you're getting these answers, and it's like, is that just like the talking point, or like what is really going on? And it's, I think now as we've gone over the last couple of months, right? There's been several news stories that suggest that we need a little bit more than a cross country pick five. And it's unfortunate that more things keep happening and happening and happening to accelerate the demise of a lot of these smaller tracks like these HISA fees. The decoupling in Florida is very concerning for Gulfstream and the industry down there. Golden Gate Fields closed. It's tough out there, and I feel like the industry itself is not making it any easier um, by just giving these superpowers basically everything they want on a silver platter. But hey, I'm just Big Race Jim, hanging out on Sunday morning coffee on Past the Wire TV, just kind of shooting from the hip and kind of whatever comes to my mind. And that has been on my mind this week, and just how we're seeing we're seeing the industry sort of contract and crumble in front of our eyes, and it just seems like nobody is the only people interested in saving it are the gamblers, and that's unfortunate. All right, Sandman wins the Arkansas Derby. Tapan Street wins the Florida Derby. I still like Sovereignty moving forward out of that Florida Derby. Next week we'll get the Bluegrass at Keeneland, the Wood Memorial at the world's greatest racetrack, the Big A Aqueduct in New York, and the Santa Anita Derby at Santa Anita Park, where we'll see if journalism is the real deal or if Citizen Bull is a realer deal. So, an exciting week ahead. PassTheWire.com, everything that you need. Visit the site often. We'll have pace points up later in the week for those 3 tracks. Have a great week. Thank you for being patient with the internet, and we'll check in with everybody next week as we finally get, more or less a 90 to 95% field set for the Kentucky Derby. Sunday morning coffee on Pass the Wire TV, brought to you by ShoreBet Coffee and AmWager. We will see everybody next week.